says in here, this is the Constitution, at least as I read it, it says that if America goes to war, Congress should declare war. Except Congress never declared war on Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Iraq, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq the second time, or Libya. So what's up with that? We also kill people with drones in Yemen, Pakistan, other places without a declaration of war. So what's going on? Judge Andrew Napolitano says, what, politicians just ignore the law?
Politicians ignore the Constitution, John. First, it's great to be here, and thanks for having me to discuss this important subject. Politicians ignore the Constitution and write their own laws. In 1973, Congress enacted the War Powers Resolution. It's called a resolution, but it's a federal statute, over President Nixon's veto. It basically says the president can fight any war he wants anywhere in the world for 90 days. He then has to go back to Congress for funds and authorization beyond 90 days. President Nixon
vetoed it because he wanted more power.
Correct. He thought it restrained him. In fact, it liberates presidents to fight all those wars you just nicely ticked off, all of which were fought: Libya, Yemen, Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, without a congressional declaration of war. No one's challenged the statute as being against the Constitution. Every president uses it.
How can it have not gone to the Supreme Court?
Because we have two very difficult obstacles to challenging federal statutes. One is, if it's a dispute between the president and the Congress, both of whom are elected, each of whom are elected by voters, the courts will say it's a political dispute. It's for them to resolve or the voters to resolve. We're not going to get involved in a political dispute between the president and the Congress. The other is a clause in the Constitution that says you can't just challenge a statute. You have to have standing to challenge it. And standing means you have personally been harmed by the operation of the statute. So who would have standing? Somebody who was a victim of an undeclared war in another country would have to come over here and challenge the statute. Not likely to happen.
So it's been challenged and the courts have just said, you can't do this. Or it hasn't even been challenged.
It hasn't even been challenged. Everybody likes it. Congress likes it. It's off the hook. It doesn't have to affirm.
You don't like it.
Well, I don't like it. People who believe that this means what it says, the Constitution, don't like it. But all presidents, from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama, love that statute because it lets them wage mini wars without getting permission.
This year, the president said, even though I possess the authority to order military strikes, I believed it was right to take this debate to Congress. In 2007, when he was not yet president, he said the president does not have power to authorize a military strike in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual or imminent threat to the nation.
Well,
nobody's pointing out this hypocrisy.
He's right under the law, and he's right under the Constitution. Excuse me, he's wrong under the law and right under the Constitution. Under the law, War Powers Act lets any president fight any war for 90 days. But under the Constitution and the treaties we've signed, we can't fight any war. We can only fight a war if we've been attacked, if we're about to be attacked, if we're asked to come to the aid of an ally, or if the UN asks us to enforce a law or a rule that another country has agreed to. None of these four situations applies for Syria. Correct.
And I go back to Libya when the president bombed Libya. He said, well, this is different from the hostilities contemplated in the War Powers Act, where I'm restrained. This is not sustained fighting or active fire with hostile forces. But I would think bombing people is like going to war against the country.
Of course bombing people is going to war. After he said what you just quoted, he said there'll be no boots on the ground. Now, when somebody says that, you have to ask them what they mean. Because boots on the ground to the president means people in uniform. Did we have Americans on the ground? Yes. They were special forces out of uniform, and they were CIA who never wear uniform. Were we killing people? Gaddafi got killed, for gosh sakes, because of our bombs. If that's not a war, I don't know what it is. He made this decision when Congress was on spring break, and he was on a trip to Brazil. There was nothing Congress could have done about it. And then when Congress came back from its spring break, it just looked the other way, because Gaddafi's a bad guy, and the president is the president.
Now, for a long time, presidents just did what they wanted to. There were very few challenges. I get the feeling now with the Tea Party, with a growing libertarian movement, there's more of a chance that people will start looking to this and saying, you know, this matters?
You know, you and I have been devoting the most recent parts of our professional careers to say this matters. The Constitution is a delegation of authority to the government. It's not an experiment. It's not a game. It's not a test. It precisely says what freedoms we will give up for the common good. When the government operates outside the Constitution, it ignores the fundamental rule of the law of the land, and it tramples our freedoms, and that's not what we elected a government for. What will protect us from the government